I'm Co. I'm the host, you guys, as you know. So I'd like to thank you guys all for coming, and I'd like to thank the ISA and my home university, Regis, for allowing me to present today. So, all right, so so just starting off with the history of like the drug war, starting with illegal trade. It started around in the 19th century, so you can argue that it's a fairly contemporary problem. History can be broken down into about three different components. So you have the 19th century, the end of like the late 19th century to 1945, which is the end of the Second World War, where Mexico started leading the illegal trade in opium and marijuana, and Peru with cocaine, although this was mostly legal trade. Then you fast forward into the 1945, into the 1960s, we have more emerging drug markets, and then in 1960 to 1984, we start to see the increased violence, and Colombia becomes the leading country of the drug trading country. And in 1980, at the end of 1984, Mexico took the leading role again. All right, so during the Spanish colonization, coca was looked down upon. But starting in the 19th century, what we see the curiosity in coca emerged. So we have there was a German graduate student who got the alkaloid, or like the chemical components of the coca leaf, in 1860, and the ophthalmologist Carl Kohler proved cocaine could be used for like eye surgeries 20 years later. So this later led to the use of cocaine in dentistry and spinal issues. So during this time as well, the United States became one of the highest demanding countries for cocaine, and this rivaled a lot of the their European counterparts. And in 1885, the Peruvian pharmacist Alfredo Vignon created cocaine sulfate, or what we know as crude cocaine. So what this allowed for, and of the coca leaf, was it made shipments of cocaine a lot much easier and a lot faster. So this led to the expansion in trade and the start of prohibition policies. All right, and so in 1948, the UN adopted a policy of eradication of coca bush, and this was the building block to incarceration even for small offenses. So the example here was in 1945, where a Cuban diplomat in Peru was arrested for 1 kilo of cocaine. Following years, in 1952, Bolivia started to prohibit its drugs as well. And but despite the prohibition efforts of these two regions, this did not stop the high demand for drugs. And in the 1960s to 1984, Colombia owned 70% of the drugs shipped to the United States. The most important factor during this time period of 1960s to 1984 was the wealth inequality and the Cuban Revolution that inspired guerrilla warfare, marking an increased scale of violence. So, in summary of the history we just covered, what we see in the beginning of the illegal drug trade was entrepreneurs taking advantage of the consistently high demand for drugs. And one of the main problems is that a lot of the crimes in one area can easily transfer into another region, which I will get into more detail later into this presentation. So obviously, with the consideration to our first impressions and history, we often associate a lot of the drugs with criminals, cartels, dangerous businesses, powerful drug lords, extensive networks of illegal trade, and we mostly commonly associated with drugs and criminals. And the response to drugs, in some way, is to be tough on crime, and we can see this through the evidence of increased incarcerations and then we have a more focused on security forces. And but despite these efforts, as I stated before, the illegal drug trade still continues. And in the context of U.S. Latin American relations, we can think of the illegal drug trade sort of as a domino effect, considering how like one crime can be easy, the crime of one country easily transfers to another, and the circulation that we know today still continues. So the drug approach of the U.S. is very similar to a lot of Latin American countries as well. All right, so starting with what we know best in the U.S. in the American context, the U.S. war on drugs was based on discrimination. First of one was 1870s, where we have the first anti-opium laws directed at Chinese immigrants, and in the 1900s, excuse me, we have anti-cocaine laws in the South targeting African Americans, and then in 1910 to the 1920s, we have the establishment of anti-marijuana laws targeting a lot of Mexican immigrants in the Midwest and the Southwest. Continuing on with the history, we have the 1960s in the US, where the drugs became like a sign of youthful rebellion. And in 1971, Nixon implemented a no-knock warrant where it was in mandatory sentences for drug abuse. In 1972, the commission tried to get marijuana decriminalized, but Nixon ignored it. 1973 to 1977, 11 states actually decriminalized marijuana. In 1977, with Jimmy Carter, he wanted to decriminalize marijuana, but it shortly shifted back to like the tough on crime approach because of the parents' concern of marijuana use in teenagers. So in the 1980s, we have President Ronald Reagan, and we shift back to being tough on crime. And under his presidency, we see a lot of increased incarceration for even nonviolent offenses. So we also, most important, I think, in Ronald Reagan's presidency was the reduction of syringe access programs, which could prevent HIV and AIDS. In the 1990s, we have President Bill Clinton. He did advocate for treatment, but went back to the approach of Ronald Reagan. And under his presidency, we had the creation of Drug Policy Alliance, and thus the war on drugs. The war on drugs still continued. In the early 2000s, we have President George Bush. And under George Bush, we see an increased militarization and increased carcerization even for nonviolent offenses again. He had a promotion of drug testing, but death rates of overdose rose dramatically during this time as well. Mid-2000s, we have President Barack Obama, who actually admitted to using cocaine. And under his presidency, we have some states that legalize marijuana, but still progress to make transition away from this tough on crime still needs to happen. Yeah, he tried it. I mean,
he wasn't mad.
People do wild stuff. So.
In the White House, it's called the White House.
There's this young years. All right. So okay, so what makes the drug trade possible for us? So the case study I will be focusing on is the state of Kentucky, and many towns with African American or Latino populations are one of the lowest income areas. However, we are going to focus on the city of Bettyville, which 98% of the 1,700 residents of the people are white, and it is known as America's poorest white town. It is one of the lowest income towns in America, and many are on private leases and or governmental assistance. All right, so historically, this town has been left out by the establishment. And in the 1960s, tracing back to the history, President Lyndon Johnson had his program known as the War on Poverty, but this was aimed at mostly minority populations, so this was not all inclusive. So the indication of sort of the failure of this program was in the 1960s. There's a survey where and they recorded that 1 in 5 adults within their region were illiterate. And ever since Johnson's presidency, there has been no increased employment rates with the following presidency. Here's a quote here from the research that I've done, where the median household income is just $12,361 a year, placing it as one of the third lowest income town in the U.S. according to the Census Bureau 2008 to 2012 survey. The poverty rate is within this area is actually 45% above the national average. And some of the things that a lot of these people are suffering through is they suffer through with high utility and medical bills, and 57% of these residents are on food stamps. Coal, which is actually one of the main industry, the production fell by 63% ever since 2000. So this had led to a lot of the desperation of a lot of people, and has been reported people selling their prescription drugs in order to buy food. So these facts here have led to 56% of all accidental deaths estimated in 2013 from drug abuse or drug overdose. How does this fit into the larger picture? We see that the drug trade prospers with conditions of poverty. All right. So consider this the previous case study, but we have since this is used in Latin American relations, we should take into consideration that developing countries actually have higher poverty rates than the United States. So here are the countries that we are going to be looking at. The Philippines, we have at 21.6% according to the Philippine Statistics Authority in 2015. Peru at 23.9% according to Peru reports in 2015. Colombia at 24% according to Trading Economics in the same year. And last but not least, the United States at 13.5% according to the U.S. Census Bureau, all within the same year. All right, so starting again with the U.S. the demand for drugs, for the U.S. demands for drugs. The U.S.-Mexico border is ideal for shipping drugs into the U.S. And actually 65% of the smuggled cocaine goes through this area. So there have been reported connections with Colombian and Mexican drug cartels, which make this trade all possible. And they ship it to seaport cities such as Miami, Boston, Miami, New York, and Philadelphia. Throughout the Caribbean, it's shipped throughout Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and Haiti. However, in the Caribbean, Jamaica is actually the ideal country where the drugs are smuggled in for U.S. and European markets. So drugs are very profitable, and in the year 2001, cocaine costs about $12,000 to $35,000 per kilo. The availability ever since the 1990s of the availability of drugs from Central and South American countries and even East Asian countries have increased during that time period, which I will get into farther into the presentation. Starting with Peru. So 60% of the cocoa production comes from Peru. And under President Fujimori, he worked with the cooperation in the 1990s with the Bush administration to eradicate the demand for coca. Under President Fujimori, though, we also have the land reform. If we were to simplify it, it's just coca was in the free market, in the substitute crops such as like coffee were traded in closed regulated free markets. This was successful for a certain period of time. However, the per capita for substitute crops did not keep up with the population growth. So what ended up happening was the leading economic power was coca. So in relation to Fujimori as well, he also increased a lot of foreign investment, and it did improve Peru to some extent. But the problem of wealth inequality remained, so that there is still a massive gap between the rich and the poor, and only the rich kind of benefited from this. And with under Fujimori, there has been accusations that foreign investment has led to the exploitation of foreign companies taking over Peru's natural resources, and this would help help continue the demand for drugs worldwide. Switching into Colombia, as we know, is one of the leading countries to ship cocaine and other drugs. Most notable was Pablo Escobar. He entered the cocaine trade in the 1970s, and under his rule, he controlled over 80% of the cocaine that was shipped into the U.S. His rise to power came from his personal life. So his father was a peasant and his mother was a school teacher, so he came from very humble beginnings. He came to power in 1975 after Restrepo was killed. And after post 1975, we have 15 tons of cocaine shipped each day and about $420 million a week. So he enjoyed a massive amounts of wealth, but he did not spend it entirely on himself. He spent his money actually on social programs for gaining a lot of their respect. So the wealth also led to the creation of his own luxury prison here, known as La Catedral or the Cathedral, which would help in him escaping. So in 1991, he surrendered to President Cesar Gaviria in June, but the government could not contain Escobar because of his massive wealth and his own luxury prison that he created. So his terror campaign came from being pursued by both Colombia and the United States, and that led to thousands of deaths of politicians, civilians, 1,000 police officers, and many others. But despite what happened, he still gained a lot of respect by thousands. And when he died, there was reported about 25,000 people who went to his funeral. All right, so Escobar's death did ruin the organization of the Medellin cartel, but it still did not get rid of the drug trade. So the Cali cartel rose to power after the Medellin cartel to continue to operate with Escobar's method until the Rodriguez Orejula brothers, who were the leaders, were captured in 1995. Then more criminal groups followed, and you have the creation of the Norte de Valle cartel from the fall of the Cali cartel, and then we have the creation of the people persecuted by Pablo Escobar, or Peeps as it's known, formed after Escobar killed the leaders Gerardo Moncada and Fernando Galeano. And these groups, the creation of these groups is the basis of Colombia's armed conflict today. We also have the rising of Joaquin Guzman, or El Chapo, emerged in Mexico, who is a figure very similar to Pablo Escobar. And then you have a new problem with criminal group. The problem with a lot of these criminal groups they are more technologically advanced. So what this results in is the ability to carry out the drug trade on a larger scale of secrecy. They are much harder to identify, and they still have the ability to bribe political officials. And repeating myself again, criminals arrested in Colombia have connections to countries like Peru and Bolivia. So in summary, the mistake of Colombia's drug war is they push crime into other areas. So they also underestimate the power of drug lords, in this case, Pablo Escobar, and there is a lack of connection to the people that Escobar helped. So there's also, and with that, we have the inconsideration to wealth inequality and poverty on the government's behalf. And then you have the creation of new underground criminal groups and the inability to eliminate the drug demand. So, transitioning to the Philippines, how is a country in Asia related to the drug war in Latin America? So the Philippines is actually a perfect country to trade, particularly throughout Southeast Asia. But there's a lot of international organizations working in the Philippines, such as African networks in Malaysia, who trade with the Philippines. And one of the most important consideration that I want you guys to think of is that a lot of the Filipinos have tried to smuggle drugs from South America. And it's not the drugs shipped to the United States are not just coming from Latin America. A lot of the drugs in the Philippines are actually shipped to the United States as well. So people have faced corruption for for a very extensive period of time. And just recently, we have the election of President Rodrigo Duterte, who states he would be tough on crime. His policy, he emphasized the need to not only police, but vigilantes to kill any suspected drug user, even without any evidence. So these are the two videos that I want you guys to watch. But what I want you to take into consideration is the perspectives that are more than just the political officials and the higher ups. So give me a moment and let me load this. Is it on? What's on?
My campaign against drugs will not stop until the last pusher and the last drug lord are.
Pag-akyat nila, sabi, trade daw walang tatakbo, sunod-sunod 6 na buto. Bakit ang mga mayayaman kinukulong ginagawang witness? Bakit pag mahihirap, pinapatay? Pero yung slogan niya nung una, maganda eh. Maganda. Pabor ako doon na ang sabi ng pagbabago. Lahat naman ng Pilipino gusto ng pagbabago. Pero walang Pilipino na may gusto na magkalat ang patay sa kalsada at maging normal ang pagpatay na lang basta ang mga pulis sa mga tao.
Moving on to the
Yeah, we had New York Times before you just won a Pulitzer Prize for reporting on
really?
yeah,
Oh my
for,
God.
his photography for the Pulitzer
I
Prize.
he definitely won my attention. Here's the second video.
Ang nakalagay sa likod niya, user na parang yan ako, tama, susunod ka na.
The most that you can do is that collateral damage. You're outside and what you're acting after after releasing it. Even if it is true that they were really killed or if there was a mistake somewhere, that 3,000 compared to the lives of 4 million of Filipinos that can be destroyed with that.
All right, let me get back. How do we get back to the
Click on the
click what? Okay. What the heck? Close it. Let's close. Back. All right. So, okay. So actually, what the recent case study in the Philippines is directly connects to Colombia, and actually, fairly recently, the ex-president actually was warning President Duterte to not make the same mistakes as he did. So, although history does not repeat itself, historical forces do. So, most likely, it's very most likely, or even inevitable, that new criminal groups arise and makes matters worse. And if we just simplify this warning, there's a declaration of war on the people and not on the conditions that make the drug trade prosper. And there's a lack of moral and individual understanding. So the possible solutions that can get us away from the tough on drugs policy is to understand the lack of access to basic needs. So our country of admiration is Portugal. So drugs are legal, but they are decriminalized. Drug traffickers and drug dealers are incarcerated, but the unique aspect of Portugal is that people holding less than a 10-day supply of drugs are not arrested. If they get caught, they go to what's called dissuasion panels, which is a group of legal, social, and psychological experts. And most cases are dismissed, but if they come with repeated offenses, they actually are forced to go to therapy. So the results have been very, very positive. So in 2001, which was the year where they did criminalize drugs, there was 1,016 cases of HIV infections. In 2012, however, the amount of cases dropped to 56. Compare that to the United States. So in 2014, 14,000 had died from prescription opioid overdose. And the drug of abuse in Portugal is actually is 5 times less than 5 times the average of the EU, or what used to be the EU, right? So the legalization, so possible legalization, possible solution also lays in legalization. So the USA, drugs are sold at a higher price. Take that into consideration. And the drug, so what needs to happen is the drop of the price of drugs to stop stealing habits. And we have to reduce incarceration, which from a statistical abstract of the United States reports that in 1975 to 1985, incarceration was reported at 57.8%. With the legalization or decriminalization of drugs, we can also allow the police to focus on the protection of communities and increase the speed of the judicial system, actually, and also make it a lot more fair. One of the most important, I think, though, is to reduce the HIV rates from the inaccessibility of drugs and kind of like the sharing of needles. And this legalization and decriminalization can also lead to saving money. So 1986, according to the Wharton econometrics of some institution in Pennsylvania, it would cost 10 billion to continue the war on drugs. So it's very pricey to continue. All right, so before we get into discussion, I would like you guys to reflect on Catholic social teaching. This is not a question of whether you are Catholic or not, but Catholic social teaching states that the dignity of work and rights of workers states that the economy must serve the people, not the other way around. And you also have the option for the poor and the vulnerable. Quote, a basic moral test is how our most vulnerable members are faring in a society marred by deepening divisions between rich and poor. It's important to note that the illegal drug trade prospers with poverty. So what are the conditions that make the drug trade flourish? Again, and is the response of the United States as one of the most powerful countries in the world an appropriate one? And further guiding yourself, what are the similarities do you see in other countries on how they conduct the war on drugs? What is the moral and or political responsibility of each country? How can the United States help develop other countries for the better? What are the historical forces need to be considered? How can countries work together? And is stability even possible at this point? So you don't have to answer every question, but these are just guide questions to kind of get the ball rolling.
Is want to go in order or?
I'm digesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Good job.
Maybe you can lead the discussion on like each of them.
Okay. So, all right. So, all right. Well, let's start with this question. This question. This is one of my favorites because obviously I created it. What are the similarities? What are the similarities do you see in other countries on how they conduct the war? We'll start with that question.
Similarities to the U.S.
Similarities to the U.S., like the being tough on crime aspect of that. Jess?
I think you have a good point in your presentation when you talk about, and I think we see this happening with a lot of the way that countries conduct the war on drugs, is that they end up creating just a vacuum where then the issue of selling the drugs or the trade routes just kind of transition to other places where it's less strict. And I do not know much about the topic, so this was cool to hear about, but I'm not sure how you can create policy within your own country when it is, as you explained, kind of such a global issue without having something on the other end of where these trade routes are and something kind of globally to combat those vacuums that are created elsewhere.
Yeah. So to bring up that point too, we see a lot of like a focus on like the security forces. Do you feel, although I truly believe that the security forces are a big solution to the problem, do you feel that there's like a too much concentration on these and there's too much of the focus on people are just criminals if they sell drugs?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to the fundamental issue. I think a better combat for war on drugs is, starting at going all the way down to the fundamental societal issue, which is that if people are using drugs as a means to make money or as a means to survive, that's an indicator that the institutions surrounding them or where they live is not providing enough access to alternatives. So,
Absolutely.
personally, I would think to start at the fundamental level, obviously the first answer goes education, but also how can we give these people other economic opportunities that combats drugs in the sense that the other activities are so much more enticing and there's so much more incentives for it that you would rather choose that than drugs. How can we start there?
So, challenge Jess's point too. Well, everybody's open to discussion, so just to challenge that point. The Filipino here mentioned that a lot of Filipinos, and it's not just Filipinos, wanted quick change, and that's what Duterte promised, and he's bringing all that change. But how are we supposed to implement quick change without the risk of what Duterte mentioned, collateral damage? John?
Utilities for solutions not you brought up public solicitation, I took the course on that. Public solicitation is all about doing focusing on the root of the problem first, and then while at the same time also um, helping in the moment. So yes, you can go in and conduct drug release, but you also have to be working to, I don't know, improve conditions for something like that, because I think what the video talks about is that or don't really have a lot of other options, economic options, so they turn to drugs to make money. So if you're just going in and killing people, like, that's great, but like, it's not gonna solve the root of the problem.
And the other thing, like about the two examples that you gave, you talked about Portugal and Philippines. Now, you have to realize that the war on drugs in those two are completely different.
Yes.
Whereas Portugal is the war on drugs is on consumption. Philippines, the war on drugs is more like on kind of like smuggling of drugs and kind of like selling drugs, not necessarily consuming it.
Yeah, the different contexts, I acknowledge the different contexts, but like in terms like political, if we're looking at the long-term stability, global stability, I really believe that we need to learn from each country. And I'm not saying that the United States or countries should be like Portugal, but there's definitely a lot of aspects that we can learn. Okay.
I think from Portugal we can learn what to do, and from Philippines we can learn what not to do, kind of, because in my opinion it shouldn't be like a war on drugs, it should be war on addiction. And like if you can cut off addiction and help people with their addiction, then there's not going to be as big of a demand for drugs. So that in turn will like filter down.
Okay.
I'm also wondering, like, obviously the Philippines are not handling this right.
Yes.
Like, yes, Duterte or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think we all agree that they need to improve the living conditions of the poor. What are the options for them? Like, is there a lot of corruption? Is that the reason there's a lot of poverty still in the Philippines?
Yeah, there's a lot of, there's a lot of corruption. I mean, you could still, you have that problem with the police not, who are not conducting, who are in part of Duterte's solution was to actually increase the salaries, I think, of police and security forces. And for vigilantes, he actually mentioned that he wanted to, he would actually give anybody like a bounty for everybody that they brought. So, there's corruption and there's definitely like bribery. Yes.
What are the Philippines like main exports? Like, what do they export? I don't know if you know that.
Well, the Philippines is the Philippines is is an island like in the middle of Southeast Asia. So historically they've been a U.S. ally, and they've been able to like export their trade is, as far as I know, their trade comes from a lot like ivory was one of them, because China would ship to the Philippines, and it served as sort of like a port for a lot of countries.
I'm just wondering,
But
like,
ivory is illegal too.
Because I was thinking like when you asked them
why are there 12 million people in poverty? And like we all agree that that's the solution. You need to bring these people out of poverty, then they won't smuggle drugs. Why does it still exist? Is there corruption at the government level that prevents them from committing to programs to improve the life?
Yes. So there's like so your question is like, there's still a lot of corruption at the level, and then I think one of the, like in the Philippine government, the structure, there's so many different political parties, and they're so unbelievably divided. So the progress that they can deliver to people is not the quickest.
Yeah. So like looking at like Colombia, we agreed that Pablo Escobar was popular among the impoverished people there because they didn't have anything else. He was like their savior. Would have been better for the U.S. to fund programs to get people out of poverty instead of just going after the people that, like, instead of just going after Escobar and just trying to kill off drug traffickers.
Like we want to challenge that?
I think only if it's going to be like a long-term sustainable intervention. Otherwise, as soon as that money runs out, people are going to turn right back to selling
but
drugs. So it's a really lucrative business.
My point is Colombia had no other way to survive.
Exactly. That's why I think in that case,
And like
killing
the
them.
Philippines doesn't seem to have any other way. So our solution is we need to improve the welfare and the lives of impoverished people and in these countries. But they can't do it. Their governments can't do it for themselves.
But aid is also very precarious if there is corruption. Like if the United States
Yeah.
gives aid, it's not going to trickle down.
That's why honestly,
That's a huge problem.
yeah.
Aid is-
and being like drug like pushers, as they call them, like is probably creating the best life possible for these people. Because that's the only way that they're making money. It might make their lives really dangerous, but how else are they going to get money? If there's 12 million people in poverty and there's no federal programs, like that's their livelihood.
Mine's not going on, so it's one of those type of conversations.
Yeah.
So,
It's stifled.
so listening to you
Oh,
guys.
no.
I still want to talk about
But I guess one thing I would want to bring up is, like, a lot of the reason that drug war happens, like, the reality is where politicians can't really think in long-term solutions because they're necessarily judged on a 2 to 6 year term to get any change by the time they get reelected and get judged again. So if you're a politician thinking, well, I'm going to be reelected in 3 years, and any change now, it's going to be more favorable. Probably it's probably wrong. I think we kind of get that, but we look more favorable instead of implement like a long-term, let's start from the bottom, bring social welfare and say, we can just knock off these top drug cartels and say, we kill the drug cartels, starting to stop, and that'll be a lot more better for the campaign trail than just saying, well, we're still starting to do this, it'll may take 10 years, but you'll see the effects later. It's quite hard to get reelected with that.
Yeah, so that's why probably in the Philippines, like the best solution, the most immediate was just to kill everybody that was involved in drug trafficking, and they, well, it's expecting that to help.
So, like, just listening to you guys touched on like the subject of like kind of human rights, and obviously leaders like Duterte have like violated so many. So, what is the moral and or political responsibility of each country?
Well, morally, like, we don't want the drug trade going on because of, you know, all the violence that comes with it. We also don't want the addiction, so we want it to stop.
Yes, absolutely.
Politically, for the U.S., we don't want these drugs coming in from other countries. And so we have to figure out a way to prevent, you know, I feel like, do we read an article recently where he talked about it would be better for us not to go in and prevent drugs from the source, but to prevent it at, you know, like our local level, like keep it from entering our area.
Yeah, that
So-
was on the defense perspective. Yeah,
And the what?
the defense perspective,
Okay.
yeah, we.
Yeah.
we
So
discussed that.
politically for the U.S., it's just keep it out as much as possible.
I just have a general like question to pose. Like, why do we as a nation view drugs like as so bad? Like, besides like some of the crime that comes with it, which like I feel like is highly overrated, like blown out of proportion in our minds. Like, why do we view it as like
Well, what
so
kind of drugs
horrible?
are you talking about?
The amount of people that die from it is pretty bad. And also like that. Like you can't like what was happening. It's like we cannot not like just
But that's what I'm saying. If they like said like, oh, we have drugs, okay, like then people wouldn't you wouldn't have
So
this
it's like,
thing.
you're saying that the
But if
US
you allow
kids.
you to get meth and all that,
Okay, so
Like that's my thing. Is that if it's people's choice to use it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
So you're like maybe you're illegal.
Yeah,
Like in.
yeah, essentially, yeah.
you get any drugs?
Like if you, it's just like a
In
very
theory.
theoretical,
Yeah.
like what if. And I can make an argument for the side of like the legalization of drugs because then it comes with the idea of not only like very social ideas, but also like you'll be able to get help if anything were to go wrong. Like who was it, Rhode Island, I think it was, accidentally, this is like a little bit under bad. But it's kind of weird though. Rhode Island accidentally legalized prostitution for 6 years through a legal loophole, and they actually saw a drop in HIV and AIDS because prostitutes were able to go to the doctor and be like, I'm a prostitute, I don't want to get any sort of diseases. And so they're able to get help, so they saw a drop in disease, which I think may be a possibility with the legalization of drugs, because if you realize that then you're not labeled as, well, you might still be labeled as like a social deviant, but you wouldn't be labeled as a criminal. Yeah. And also, yeah. That's my point, but prostitution's illegal in Rhode Island.
Is it right now?
It's like in one county in Rhode Island, they accidentally legalized it through, I think it was, I'm trying to remember, I did this last semester. And HIV actually dropped by like 47% because people were able to, they weren't charged for being prostitutes, but also you get the, when you label someone as a criminal and you believe that they're deviant, and continually label and call the deviant in society, they're more likely to act in deviant manners. So therefore, just like snowballing the effects of poverty and crime rates.
All right, let me
That's
try
exactly
to
what
bring
I
you
was
guys
getting
back
at.
in. So I honestly wanted to throw you in and throw you guys to look at the individual standings, understandings of things, and I really like where you guys are going. So during this whole thing time, I was thinking, do you believe that the problem actually lies with put away aside the political thing, put away the economics? Do you believe that it comes from ourselves? Because have you ever run into those people who are entitled and kind of asshole-like because they have, education and stuff like that? They view themselves as superior. So when people have that sort of attitude, do you feel that it prevents us from implementing the solutions that we really need to do?
So who are you saying has this kind of attitudes?
So if
that are not involved in the drug trade might have entitled.
So my interview with a lot of Filipinos, I say like, okay, well, how's the Philippines under the debt? And the first thing they say, it's great because for once in our lifetime we have safety, we have the criminals are scared now, but they are saying this from a upper perspective. They're either in the U.S. or they are upper class, and it's very, very easy to dismiss the poor, as we've seen.
Are we talking about this in the United States though?
It's universal. It's universal. Do you believe that the problem lies within ourselves, like the individual person, and do individuals actually prevent us from implementing the solutions that really need to happen?
Yeah, well, I think this kind of goes back to Logan's point. Like, they just wanted the quickest solution possible. Like, politicians often want that, and they were able to just not see what happened, not see the violence that went on when they were eliminating those criminals. And so, yeah, at the personal level, it was fine with them because, they weren't seeing it, it wasn't in front of them, So, yeah, I think that can translate in a lot of ways. I think we can do that in the U.S. Just say, don't do drugs,
Which is very common.
And a lot of people in poor communities like that one you look at, they're doing drugs because they have nothing else. They're desperate. They lost all their jobs, and we don't have that same shared experience. It's easy to dismiss them as ridiculous. Like, why would you do that?
Or like calling them even what we refer to them as hillbillies and things like that.
Oh yeah.
No. Sorry.
I mean, I was just gonna say kind of what Duncan said before he said it. Arrogance can lead to an ignorant worldview, I think, because you're kind of closed off in your little box. You don't really want to interact with the other half. And so you just do what you think is right to improve your life and like your current status, but you don't really look at everybody else in the world as a whole. So in that regard, yeah, I think like people's arrogance can get in the way of like implementing effective
Kind of like the
treatment, but
airplane, you know, like oxygen will fly out of the mask. Help yourself before others. Kind of sort of like that.
no, because that's actually what you're supposed to do.
Okay. I don't like you no more. Okay.
But yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, it's very interesting that DJ guy said, what's 3,000 lives compared to 4 million that are saved from the drugs?
Yeah,
He wouldn't say that if it was 3,000 lives of people around him or upper class.
Yeah, people that he cared about.
You know, he would never ever say that.
Also, who are the 4 million he's talking about?
the 4 million. I wasn't sure about that
He's
either.
saying
So.
like if like the drug,
If 4 million people will
4
drive
million
from.
people
4
would be
million
addicted
people will like die from drug related.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then who are these poor people selling to? They're probably selling to the upper class, right?
Well, actually, there's a lot. I mean,
Killing
I've
the
been
poor
doing a lot of
seems
research on this. Like the
Reverse
average
Robin
drug seller could make about, I think, 400 to 600 pesos a week. And the other problem is it's not just Filipinos who are drugging it or selling this. There's a lot of There's actually a lot of Chinese populations, and I'm not saying about all of them, but like like I said, the international connections. So, and like I said, like it's perfect to sell these drugs. So there's a lot of people like Chinese immigrants or who come to the Philippines because the drug demand is so high and such. My question. So how do you think the United States can help develop other countries for the better?
in relation to drugs.
In relation to drugs, yes. Courtney?
I think we need to take an analytical perspective on private American companies influencing various economies and policies in other countries. For example, the coal company in Colombia and various issues that provides because coca, which is prime ingredient in cocaine, is still used in the production of Coca-Cola. There's the way the cocoa leaves here are is still considered illegal with the United States. But I know that it's continually caused a lot of problems in Colombia where they're trying to regulate cocoa production, but the only people that it's really affecting is the small farmers and the ones that are like producing it for cocaine intentions continually move, and the only people that are experiencing the backlash are the small farmers, and it's causing an economic downturn in their society.
Yeah, that was like kind of one Colombia, that was the early implementation, that's what it caused. But then eventually it spread to be bigger producers as well. So now Colombia jumped second. Now Peru is the main producer of coca leaf.
Okay, because I was trying to recall from this presentation a while ago.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, at the beginning, that's obviously they are the ones that are first, because they are not offered, they don't have the economic means to bounce back from that and try to do something else. So it takes time for the government to bring an alternative solution, like another crop or something like that. Whereas like the big producers, okay, they take the hit, but they might have some money, some savings or something to get by. And that's exactly what's happening in Peru as well.
Madison?
I think back to your airplane oxygen analogy. I think before we try and develop other countries and like help them with their drug problems, we need to help ourselves. We have such a big drug problem in the States. And like you had your map up there earlier, like most of the drugs are going to the States.
Yes.
So like if we fixed our own drug problem and cut off the demand, like it would end a lot of the drug trade in other countries.
Yeah, that's what I meant at the beginning when I said that the war on drugs is different.
Yeah.
In Peru, we're trying to prevent people from actually making the drugs, but in the US from consuming it. So you have to go about it in different ways.
Interestingly enough, though, we connecting to vigilantes in the Philippines. Vigilantes are actually a very big problem. So does that relate to what?
Yeah, no, it's more like for other type of crimes.
Okay.
Yeah, but specifically for drugs, no, because like coca leaf is still part of not the main crop, but there's a lot of people that rely on it, but not necessarily for drugs, but a lot of it is not, doesn't have kind of like the certificate under what because ENACO, that's the main office that's supposed to give you permission to sell it, but more like for other users, not cocaine production. So, but if you don't do it through them, you're automatically illegal. So they will take over the position from you.
What Oscar was saying, typically the major trend is countries that are consumers of drugs, to get rid of the problem, they use legalization and social programs to kind of cut the demand down. And then countries that are producers of drugs are the ones that have taken a more militarized approach to actually clearing down the fields, cutting down coca, killing anybody that's making drugs. But the problem with the U.S. is that we're both major consumers and a major producer of drugs.
Yes.
So even though importation is a big problem, if you ask, I mean, pretty much everybody I know back home does some form of drug. I don't because I'm going to work for the DEA. But like a lot of my friends smoke weed. And when you ask them where they get their weed from, it's never like, oh, I know this guy who knows this guy who knows this guy who gets it from over the border. It's in Texas, somebody will drive up to Colorado, buy it legally, drive back down to Texas, and then sell it at a much higher rate. So the problem is both cutting down how we like the amount of users of drugs, but also the same producing of drugs at the same time. So it's a mix of drugs.
Yes, overall, I think the United States has a really narrow view of drug use. I think they're starting now to target all types of drugs, whether it be prescription narcotics or inhalants or marijuana or cocaine. But before, I feel like they were just so focused on we just have to destroy the drug crop. It's just kind of funny to think about it now. It's like, why? That would never work. Okay, you get rid of all the cocaine in the world. People are just going to start using heroin. That's not going to work. And so I feel like, again, we just have to do the bottom-up approach. We start with the individual, help them out. And it's like that in all countries because every country has their own drug of choice to say. So I feel like trying to eliminate drug production is never going to be effective because there will always just be more new synthetic drugs. So you just gotta.
The other thing too is Peru, and correct me if I'm wrong. They with the land reform, one of the biggest problems is that people can be easily entitled to land. Right? There's not enough regulation to owning land. And then with coca, leading over substitute crops, that's the other issue that's connected. So.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this on my previous class, the fact that with issues like deforestation, and actually deforestation in the jungle happens because of coca leaf production. They try to come up with other type of solutions. But these places are so inaccessible, it's very difficult for the government to go in there and make sure that, for example, you are we call it fallow. So instead of just slash and burn an area, you let it rest and then you cultivate again. But since coca leaf is not that demanding in terms of nutrients, you can cultivate on and on and on. So, these places are just there for people to take. So they just keep expanding and expanding. So there's no regulation of the private land.
Not to insult anybody's opinion that they've been speaking, but I'm sorry, but
If somebody in this classroom had had a great idea like, oh, the whole time we've been trying to cut down on all the cocoa leaves and we've been trying to get rid of all the cartels, and that's not working, we need to start through education and start with the kids and whatnot. Somebody else has also thought of that. There are a lot of programs in the US based on education. There's social programs that will pass out new needles so that you're not reusing needles. There are healthcare clinics that you can go get help for free. There's counseling that you can get for free. So even though we may need to boost those programs up as much as possible, that's still going to take a long time. And you can't say we're going to focus all of our efforts into these super long-term programs and say, yes, in 30 years, that's definitely going to help. That's like what's going to get rid of the drug problem. But in the meantime, we still need to be taking down drug dealers, taking down drug traffickers, and taking down the cartels and taking down the producers of drugs to stifle that while we wait for those programs to work themselves out.
Yes, that is true, but again, you're talking about the focusing on long term, and that's very important. But you're also emphasizing the need for short term. But what you're saying sounds good on paper, but in reality, like we focus on police, like look at what's happening in the United States. I mean, there's higher incarceration rates for minorities than there are whites. So how are we supposed to achieve a balance of focusing equally on the importance of the short and long term benefits?
Another thing, I guess, I don't know, James kind of being on mandatory minimums, and you think if those weren't effective, these other social problems are well, where the longest day you're counting with like more than 1 ounce of marijuana, dealing in prison for 15 years, and like how that kind of takes away the ability for people's lives depend, they're trying to get by, and if you take away their main source of income, kind of what goes on there. You think we had less strict laws on people who are dealing, who are involved in this, and more trying to help them and say, here's an alternative, do you think that would make these a little more better?
I definitely don't think that we need extremely strict prison terms for people. I mean, if you're caught with a couple of joints, you don't need to be going to jail for 15 years. The focus definitely needs to be on the people higher up, which is what all of the federal programs are working towards. Now, local law enforcement obviously are the people that are incarcerating all the minorities, which is definitely a big problem of, you know, the percent of Black Americans versus white Americans in jail for small offenses. It's So like- that population is completely out of proportion.
If you take out someone high up in a cartel in Mexico or Colombia, is someone not just gonna rise up because they have no other option?
Well, that's what takes so long with these investigations, is that they don't just go up and take the top person out. They actually deconstruct the entire organization. So they plot every single member of it, make sure that they can properly.
Yeah, but you don't fix the original problem that caused the organization to become a different game.
Yeah.
And so, just inevitably, like we saw in Colombia, new organizations rose up, and now there's still a war there because we haven't fixed it.
Yeah, that's why we need to focus on the long term as well. But while those long term solutions are working themselves out, it's not perfect.
Yeah, but we haven't really focused on the long term. We focus on the long term in the U.S.,
Yeah.
but not in like Mexico, Philippines, Colombia, these places.
That's because we have to fix the economy.
Yeah, and so what do you do?
Yeah, but to this point, the higher you get, and then you get to the like drug war there, you remove them. But then you have all the people that are producing the coca like here in South America, you find somebody else, not a buyer, and then they will just keep going. So then it's like you can remove whoever is buying and distributing in the US, but then you at the same time you need to remove the people that are producing it as well. So which one you fix first? With Plan Colombia, yeah, you work for Colombia, but now they push all the production to Peru. So now we are the main producers of cocoa. So now we have the Plan Peru, and then well, if we do that, soon we'll have Bolivia taking the first place in producing cocoa. So it's like we need, I know that from what we have learned so far, like blanket policies never work, and they actually like fire back, but we might need something like that.
Okay. Don't forget, like the U.S. is one of the closest neighbors, Mexico, with like the U.S.-Mexico border and the trade.
Yeah,
So,
well,
and
yeah,
you could
there you
easily
go.
push it into Central America as well.
So there are countries that just have a huge impact on the drug dealing, just being the route to get the drugs into the US. So then how you go about that? You are not going to burn fields anymore because they are not producing cocaine. So you need to get rid of the dealers, and that's more like social.
John?
Yeah, that's just the really frustrating thing, I guess, foreign policy in South America. Anyway, it's like, same thing happens in the Middle East. Like, we like to bomb the shit out of like the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, cut their head off, and those gates. But then they go away for a couple of years, and a couple of years later, we have a ISIS.
Yeah.
It's the same problems like this.
Fucking Medusa. Cut off one head to grow back.
Since we only have 15 minutes, I think we can all, I think we can try to make a safe assumption. You can kill me after class if you want. But yeah, I think we can all agree that the approach that the U.S. is taking is not not an appropriate one, as we've seen. So, do you think stability is even possible at this point?
And by what you mean by
Stability as if we were to implement the solutions right here, right now, and give it a certain amount of time period, do you think that we could it would be enough to save us from our past mistakes?
In this room with us.
Well, yes, of course.
No.
We can really like our answer on the idea of like a drug-free world, which I suppose is nearly possible. Like, I'd love to say that it's possible, but there's always some form of addiction that just depending culturally, historically, even religiously, like there's some form of addiction that everyone's going to turn to, whether it be even you can even make the argument that working out is an addiction, and really looking to try and obliterate that. And I feel that also I was waiting for one of your questions that you can pick up is what historical forces need to be considered in this
Yeah, you
war on
could.
drugs. And what I find really interesting about this is that obviously like cocaine and heroin are really hard drugs, but they didn't necessarily start off in that manner. Like the coca leaves didn't start off as being cocaine, and I really
I mean, you
don't
drink
know.
coca leaves.
Yeah, I would say I don't know like the development or how it came to be, but but like European and American now, but if you can argue the old world, like alcohol would be a form of addiction that's acceptable. Not entirely acceptable, but like you don't have to. Well, yeah, prohibition. But what I'm saying is that we don't necessarily have alcohol with that. It doesn't have the same label as cocaine and heroin and things like that, which is not at the same level, but maybe those would have been developed into the extreme that they are today if they had received the same label as alcohol did in history.
So you're saying that like labeling.
Yeah, because like
So like the social stigma.
the social stigma
Has a lot.
has a huge influence on just drug usage.
There are also drugs that are inherently awful for your body.
Well, are any of them good for your body?
I was gonna say,
No,
take that argument
But
out.
but we could say like, weed is not like terrible for you. Like people are, like,
I mean,
people can socially function like smoking weed regularly.
Like meth has a long-term effect on your body, but so does eating like fried fat foods every day.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
but it works so fast. Like heroin and meth destroy your body at a rapid rate.
Yeah. It is.
That's true. That's very true.
It's not.
Judge it after you.
You like meth and fat.
Okay.
Good.
Literally.
I think honestly the only way to achieve stability is by completely legalizing it. And it sounds crazy and it might not ever happen because of moral codes. But I think by I'm not talking about what I would do. I just think that's the only way you could achieve stability, like worldwide, because that way it would become more regulated, more regulated, and it could also become like more of a profitable industry for like the entire world. Because honestly, the drug trade occurs whether it's legal or illegal. So right now, millions and millions of dollars are being brought into the United States every year, but the government's making no money on it. So
it's profit.
honestly, if you're gonna have it, might as well make it profitable for the United States. Might as well make it profitable for Peru. Might as well make it profitable for everybody. And also, like by legalizing it, people like do drugs sometimes just to be rebels. And like if you're gonna okay, well, it's like in high school or something. Think about like the first time you did weed. Okay, well, then my point is, if you are gonna use drugs, you're probably gonna like use heroin, regardless of whether it's legal or illegal.
Okay. I want to.
So legalizing it's not going to
I want to
change
challenge this.
individual use.
I do. Okay, so do you believe you say I've heard some really good opinions and I really love, but the stability I think also lays in the ability to recognize hypocrisy. And now Duterte actually pointed this out in Obama. When Obama was calling out Duterte for his human rights violations, the first thing he said was, "Fuck you! I'm the president of a sovereign nation," and you know it was but at the same time he's also pointing out the hypocrisy of the United States. Why would the United States be calling out the Philippines for human rights violations when the United States has a model that's very similar to like being tough on crime? You see it in the Philippines and other Colombia and Latin American countries be tough on crime. The United States has the same, if not a similar model.
That's not usually condoned by the president, like mass killings.
Yeah.
I've never
I
seen
think
a
that's
law
different,
like-
but some
I've yet to see that.
some messages are condemned by the president. I thought that's where you were going in the Middle East when we did these drone strikes and just obliterate communities.
We're talking about on our own people, though.
Yeah, but
Like, that's just doesn't, like, because some of those people don't make it.
It's not Obama's job to protect everybody in the world. Now it's Trump's job.
Oh God!
don't go there.
Yeah. No, it's something different. It's way more.
I'm sorry. I want one of John's, Dean's, and Courtney's since they, I obliterated them. By giving them this question.
Sorry.
Sorry. I'm very sorry. But Logan, go ahead.
Well, I think, to your point, I think the two countries are going in very different directions. You have the Philippines, who just like the president's like saying we're going to kill all these drug lords, and you have right now in the U.S. House representatives the first ever bipartisan responsibility to get rid of mandatory minimums. I think there's a movement in the U.S. away from the war on drugs and movement in the Philippines towards war on drugs. To compare them, I don't think is accurate. Yeah. And also to McKenna's point, and Doug's point, I think you're both wrong. I think, obviously legalization is too far to say that we should try to profit from something like the pain of drugs, and that is probably too far. I'm just saying we should keep on more drugs and not really do anything. I think decriminalization might be the right path to go, where it's not saying legalizing saying it's okay, but saying if you do it, you're not going to be punished harshly for it. We're going to try to help you out. It's still wrong that you're doing this. We're going to try to work with you to find a way. So like decriminalizing the idea that it's not accepting this idea that we're trying to do it in a way and not be as harsh. I think that's perhaps the approach we should go and decide just total legalization or total war on drugs.
I didn't say total war on drugs. I said some drugs are terrible for you. That's all I said.
Courtney, please.
I didn't say what you do.
Let's balance it out.
So, I would agree with,
Like it.
with the decriminalization not necessarily complete legalization, but also in support of some of the points that we kind of agreed on earlier. And once again, I'll be comparing two drugs that are incredibly different. The legalization of marijuana in Colorado, they saw incredible like economic benefits of that that are going towards education now, and it's becoming a question for my home state as the legalization of marijuana just because of the fall in the oil industry. And there is economic benefits of it, but the decriminalization of the hard drugs might be the better option, but it's at least an idea to entertain. It shouldn't be shot down right from the get-go because drugs are inherently bad. Like,
No.
The idiots use drugs.
Y'all can't say drugs. I'm saying specific ones that are freaking terrible.
Which ones?
Like meth,
Like,
heroin.
There's like 4 ranks of drugs. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Marijuana is a rank 4, but yet it's not physically harmful to your body.
That's according to the U.S. government.
No,
Madison,
it's international.
Madison, can I hear from you too as well?
That's international.
Yeah, there's drug rankings.
I think we all agree that meth and heroin are inherently bad, but what's your approach to dealing with it?
Okay, my approach to that should be different than my approach to marijuana.
Different how? What would you do?
there should be a different.
You're acting like it's just fine if we just let the meth and heroin flow freely. That would be awesome.
It already does. You just don't know it's there.
No, just shut up. In the 1800s, with opium,
There's so many people.
there was 12 million people addicted to opium. Their society was destroyed. They could not function. And so they were willing to go to work with people who
That's very true, very true.
who annihilated them because they had, it was either be destroyed by opium or be destroyed by British guns. Because opium is that bad.
But you think by decriminalizing it, millions more Americans are going to start trying meth and heroin? Be like, yeah, it's decriminalized. Here we go.
I think kids in Los Angeles that are trying all these drugs, if they can get meth, they might do it.
What's the next thing when Colorado legalized marijuana, the amount of use dropped. In Portugal, they decriminalized cocaine and heroin dropped. The drug wasn't decriminalized.
When Rhode Island, on the 1989 Constitution, gonorrhea rates and
Yeah, great as well.
just for the Washington.
Prostitution is not
That makes sense.
extremely addictive.
I mean, but it's desperation
That's-
though. All right. Guys, thank you. Thank you for your input and everything. Thank you to ISA and